And thanks everybody for being here tonight, our first Thursday of every month, a sociable and very social event here for Expats Portugal. We're all about the knowledge, all about the community. Please say hello to each other via the chat as well. And the knowledge part, that's the community part. The knowledge part is finding out how people get here to Portugal and their personal first-hand testimony of their experiences moving into Portugal. And to tell us about it from that first-person perspective, the ups and downs, is Amit this evening. So good evening to you, Amit. Thank you so much for being here tonight for this special show, the first of its kind. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you.
Very good. And perhaps we could start with that lovely view behind you. Where are you tonight?
So we found a place kind of uphill from the waterfront in Estoril. So that view is actually on our daily dog walk by the water. And so we're kind of close to Cascais, but not, we tend to avoid some of the worst, I think, of the tourist traffic in Cascais, but, weekends are still pretty crowded. So we go east. So we go towards Carcavelos and, some of those, and we found some really nice beach bars that don't get crowded because they're on the rocks and not on the beach. So.
Okay, excellent. And that's the sort of information I think people want to hear about, isn't it? They come to Portugal and have a lovely time, and then they begin to want to avoid other tourists here in Portugal. So a few of your insider tips along those lines would be really good, I think, around Estoril and Cascais for sure. And Astrid might be able to help with that too this evening. You say we, Amit. Who would that be? Who's in your party that's come to Portugal?
Oh, my wife is here. She's very German and very camera shy. So she's decided to not show up on this, but I can speak for her. So I'll tell you some of her observations as well if somebody wants to know.
Sorry, I asked my question and disappeared there. I was asking you who is in your party that's come to Portugal?
Yeah, it's Petra, my wife, and she is sitting and reading on the balcony. She's not very fond of appearing in public.
Oh, okay.
So I think I'll have to speak for her if there are questions.
All right. And when did your first interest in Portugal come about? When did this great adventure begin for you?
So a little bit of background. So we actually we lived in California for a long time, about 30 years. And once both daughters left, the younger one left for college, we became what the States is called an empty nester, right? So the birds have flown, you can do what you want, run around the house without pants on, whatever. But it's one of the things we had always said is once the kids were out, we would downsize and move somewhere that was that gave us a bit more access to city life, because a typical suburb in the US, for those of you who haven't lived there, is very, very car centric, very car centric. I mean, you don't see neighbors during the day anyway. So the old cup of sugar from the neighbor actually requires a 2-mile round trip to the nearest store to get that, right? So anything you want requires a car. And it was getting absurd. We ended up with 3 cars at one point while our kids, the older one was in high school. So we said, no more of this. So we moved to city life on the East Coast in Alexandria, Virginia, where we were in this area called Old Town, very pretty, historic. The car went from 20,000 miles a year to, I think we sold it with 11,000 miles in 4 years. So it was a huge difference in terms of driving, lots of places to walk to and all of that. So what we wanted was another place with similar kind of lifestyle, but just, not where we were spending $1 million for a 2.5 bedroom house. And so The funny thing is, we actually when we started looking, and there's a bit of background also that made it easier for us to look at Europe. My wife is German, so we didn't need a visa. Well, she didn't need a visa, and I could qualify under this whole family reunification thing. And so that at least took one obstacle out of our path. And so we started looking. We actually started finding places in Spain, and then started hearing about Portugal. So we switched to Portugal, and then I found Expats Portugal, and that's when the real sort of learning began. Lots of research, lots of videos. I probably can tell you every crease on Carl's face at this point. And so that research, I think, kind of solidified the whole move idea. And one of the things that happened during COVID was it convinced us that we could live and work from anywhere. I think a lot of other people realized that as well. So that's what happened to us. And I said, okay, instead of dealing with California and the East Coast being 3 hours apart, I'll deal with the East Coast and Portugal being 5 hours apart. Well, not that big a deal.
Okay, well, great. I've got some really good news today. Family reunification appointments have been made available. Got a message from Gilda earlier on today. So that's
that's great. Yeah.
Anybody who's using the same approach that Amit and Petra have chosen, that's really good news. Also, the other thing today is it's a happy day of the Portuguese language. Thank you for that reminder, Mark. And I'll come back to you, Amit, on how well your Portuguese is going. But we need to set the scene a little bit more and find out more about you. Aviva, thank you for putting your hand up to ask a question. We'll come back to you as well. So what were the first things that you heard about Portugal where you thought, this is worthy of consideration? What were those sort of little teasers that you were finding on the internet?
I think the two big things for us were temperate climate, because where we were, we got lots of snow in the winter and freezing rain and the whole works. And then it'd be hot and humid in the summer with no breeze worth speaking of, and the dog didn't want to go out till 11 o'clock at night. And so we were done with that, right? Obviously, we came from California, which was fairly temperate. And so we said, okay, we want this kind of walkable and friendly local kind of lifestyle, but without having to deal with a lot of rain, a lot of temperature fluctuations and all of that. And frankly, the other thing was safety overall. Again, I'm sure any American will attest to that we were just tired of worrying about going out after dark, or we had a carjacking in our local gas station where we went to during the day, and stuff like that. So we just, it was kind of building up in the background, and we just said, okay. And of course, there was a whole political angle to it as well. But essentially, we said we want to go to a country that nobody gives a damn about, right? So we don't have to worry about China or Russia or any of that other stuff.
Yes.
And so we had actually, a funny story, but we had actually considered Liechtenstein and Luxembourg, because we said, Americans don't even know that those are countries. And so, maybe that's a good place to start, where if nobody knows you exist, then they really aren't going to come after you.
Wow.
But anyway, so Portugal turned out to be not quite that small, but not on that scale. But it also seems, very easygoing and doesn't get involved a lot, but except in a good way. Obviously, the way they're treating refugees and taking in people from the Ukraine has been very impressive. We've seen a lot of groundswell support, whereas, again, we watch the stories out of the US and it's very split. And there are a lot of people saying, oh, no, just let them be and let's not interfere. not our business. So anyway, so that's
perfect.
how we ended up.
Yeah, the perfect storm of conditions. And so let's go into the reality of it. Those were the things that attracted you and look good on paper. Which of those things has proven to be true and to your liking? Because it's important, I think, that we look at the ups and the downs. And I think, you joined us early on. You saw that we were running our Premium Plus program, and you joined that in the beta stage, and it was great fun working with you. And I get the sense that, this is a massively positive and excellent decision for you. Is that the case from your point of view?
Yes. So I think, the key. So one thing that maybe I haven't said before, but this is my second migration, if you will, right? So I went from living and growing up in India, and then in my early 20s, I went to Boston, where I was wearing sneakers and 6 feet of snow. And yeah, it was pretty sad. But so I've done this kind of a move before. Obviously under very different circumstances. I had one suitcase. I didn't have to worry about a moving company or any of that stuff. But I think, we both tend to be sort of heavily into research and analysis. And so I think we knew what we were getting ourselves into as much as you can from far away. And so, we knew to expect bureaucracy, and luckily both India and Germany are known for their bureaucracy. So it's not that we were completely surprised or, it's still, we call Millennium, the bank that makes the government look good, I think should be their tagline. All right. And so, I mean, we laugh about it now, but it took us 4 tries to get us our debit cards, because of course they had sent them to us and they said it was lost. Well, actually, it wasn't lost. They were in the mail in Alexandria, Virginia, being forwarded to my daughter in Seattle, Washington, because unlike the instruction which said give it to the bank so we can go pick it up, they decided they were going to mail it to the US. But anyway, so but that kind of thing, again, was basically expected. And so, we were pleasantly surprised with a lot of our expectations. Clearly the people are very, very friendly. We've had, there's some significant differences, I think, in the way they approach even each other, but definitely with us as being estrangeros. They just, you get a very different approach in the US. You get a lot more of the what do you do, where are you from, no, where you can't possibly be American, that kind of thing. And so, I think overall it's met or exceeded our expectations in almost every area. And it's probably been a little cooler than we had expected. But again, I like your description or whoever came up with that. It's a cold country with a hot sun. So we find that all the time where we'll take, and it's actually not that unusual for us because my younger one lives in San Diego, and San Diego is like that. It can be very warm during the day, but in the evening you need a jacket of some kind. And so we're finding the same kind of thing here. But then, we're 10 minutes from the waterfront. So it makes sense that the wind coming off the water is going to be cold.
Yes. Yeah.
So
it doesn't make any sense when you first hear that, does it? The cold country with the hot sun. And then there come the days when you think, that makes so much sense now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's so lovely to hear that you've had such a positive and good time here already. You trained yourselves a little bit with the German and Indian bureaucracy. You had the kind of training wheels or stabilizers, or a little bit of pre-training to deal with how it is in Portugal. And Millennium Bank have given you an enforced saving scheme. Not allowed
definitely,
There's an upside to that, isn't it? You haven't been able to
Yeah,
spend.
but but then, so on one hand, you see that kind of bureaucracy, basically. But on the other hand, their app and the digital payment system is further ahead than the US or anywhere else that we've been. You can just scan a little QR code, and even our local, fruit and vegetable market takes that. And so, we're probably using even less cash, if that's possible, than the US.
Yes.
It's just that we're not using credit cards. We're debiting the bank directly, but without having to hand over a debit card, which, at least to us Americans, that's a scary thing to do, right? Because you don't have the same set of protections in the US on debit cards as you do on credit cards. But again, it seems very advanced, and you can even take somebody's phone number and make a payment. We did that at this local tapas place where they didn't have the machine to do the scan of the QR code. So yeah, it's balanced. So for every sort of bureaucratic hill you have to climb, there are other things that make up for it.
Yeah, superb. And I think I heard you say quite recently you were a little surprised at how free and easy people with passports in the United States. You guard your passport with your life, right? And here people say, "Oh, give us your passport, and we'll have a look at that, or we'll look after that for you for a little while. Don't worry." Has that been a bit of a thing?
Yeah, it was a little. We were a little apprehensive at first because there were a couple of trips to the bank where at that point we said, look, you have copies of our passports, you have looked at them, you've examined the binding and everything else, they were genuine. So, but I understand where they're coming from, which is we don't have any kind of Portuguese ID, right? So there's nothing that they can use to identify who we are except the passport. In the US, it's become kind of standard to just look at your state issued driver's license. But I don't blame the folks here. They're not going to know how to examine, 52 states worth of driver's licenses and know which ones are genuine. So it makes sense. It's just, we just had to get used to the idea of, hey, you have to take a purse every time and take our passports along because we never know where you might need it.
And they might disappear for a few minutes to be photocopied, and you have to kind of get used to that, don't you?
Right.
Excellent. So ups and downs. It doesn't seem like there have been, there's been anything that negative or difficult for you. What's helped with this process, Amit, if I may ask? What's been useful to you in getting you here?
So there were a couple of things that we did that I think helped a lot. One was we had help with the whole rental for a month in Porto, rental for a month in Lisbon. And the benefit of that was, the place we found now was not listed on any site. It was a private listing, essentially, that the landlady only told, I think, some local companies or something like that, that she had an apartment available. And the person we were getting help from, she had a friend at this company who said, oh, you're looking for one of these? Yeah, I know somebody who's got one. And so we did the whole deal in 2 days. And in fact, we skipped the short-term rental in Lisbon because of that. So we came directly from our Airbnb in Porto to our long-term rental here. And so I think so that's one example. We did, we hired a lawyer, at least partly because I'm going to be setting up my company here or a subsidiary here. Yeah. But again, they know the ropes when it comes to residency and NAIFs and this and that. So having the right kind of help, I think, just gives you a big leg up where you're not doing all of this. So for example, we signed the lease, I think, 2 days before the move-in date. And literally within the first day or two, we thought, it's going to be camping. We'll probably have to pitch a tent on the garden of the condominium complex, because obviously there was no water, no heat, no light or anything, no gas. But again, through the help of the agent, she went and camped out at some of these utility offices, and we had everything done within 2 days.
Perfect.
And there's no way we could have accomplished that on our own. I just don't think.
Yeah, I think there are two barriers, aren't there? There's a language barrier, and then there's the cultural barrier of knowing exactly where these things are. Because your electricity agency, I think the first one I registered at was an optician's. The opticians had a little EDP franchise or department. They're an agent for EDP, and if you could walk past the shop and not know that, local people know that, and obviously the person you were dealing with and were able to do everything for you in 48 hours. Yeah. So that sort of help is really good. Any other kinds of help or anything that you do differently if you were going at it a second time, which you won't be, but if you would you do anything differently? Yeah,
I think the one thing that's been a bit of a disappointment is the whole furniture moving aspect of it.
From the States to over here?
Yes. So, and I'm not sure that would be repeatable by anybody else potentially, because of the unique circumstances. Not everybody moves during a war and a pandemic. So we got our last stuff loaded up at the end of February when we moved out of our house, and GIR, we are using GIR, and so they said, look, you have enough stuff that we can just give you a container, 20-foot container. And that will make things easier because it's easier to schedule, whereas a partial can sometimes, languish in a warehouse looking for the right size of space available. So we said, fine. In fact, we added a bunch of furniture because we said, okay, if we're going to pay for a container, we might as well take this stuff. And the funny thing was, we knew it would probably take a while to get out because of the port delays and all that. But what we ended up with is they had given us a date in April where it was going to be moved, loaded to a ship, and then we would get it in May. And it was at the port on the date. The ship was there, but they couldn't load it on the ship for some reason. And so it had to go back to Baltimore for storage. And now now they've got a new date for the middle of May, which is almost a month later than the original date. Yeah. And now we won't get it till the end of June, which is about 4 months after we had it packed up. So, and I think this is all, new to us. We certainly haven't moved a container across the ocean before. There's obviously a lot more control over a container move. But I think that's and unfortunately you don't have a lot of visibility into that process, right? So, for example, when we tell or when GIR told us that, they just said, look, it's in the hands of the shipping company. There's nothing we can do right now. So until it arrives here, it's out of our hands. So I'm not sure anybody could actually do something about it, but that was the one thing that was a negative surprise for us. But,
hence the phrase, worse things happen at sea, I guess. And what would you do that differently? Would you decide to bring less, in retrospect? Would that have been a better decision, do you think?
Well, we thought about that, but I'm not sure that would have helped. So, okay. Having only a partial container load probably wouldn't have made any difference in this process. Yeah. The only thing I can think of is maybe, could we have brought a few more things with us, knowing that this is what we were going through. But even that, we brought 4 suitcases. I wouldn't want to bring more than that. Yeah. Especially when you have a dog with you. So
Yes. So I guess all or nothing would be the options. But when you start moving things, you have to be prepared possibly for some of these sorts of delays and many moving parts and many variables in that sort of process.
Yeah. So obviously, the potential downside is you end up duplicating some things that are sitting in a container somewhere because you don't have access to them. But I think overall it's been manageable.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you. And just the last question from me then, if I may just ask you how you found working with Expats Portugal and how helpful we may have been in this process, bringing you to Portugal.
Yeah, I think the organization of that, the 10, 12 week, I forget exactly how long it was, but, the whole moving, the beta test that we joined, that it was great to have some sort of organization to the process, right? To say, okay, here's what we need to know about this stuff. Here's what we need to know and do about things. And so I think, as you are dealing with more and more people, I could see having almost like a decision tree kind of thing to say, hey, if one of you is a European citizen, skip the D7 part, right? And if you're both Americans or Brits or something else, then start here, and then I think it's good to know when to do what in order for things to line up when you actually move. Right. And I think we learned a lot about that from, that combination of the sessions you did and even some of the background videos you had already done. We also talked to Josh and Kaylee at Expats Everywhere. And so, I think it's good to learn from the hive mind, basically, and not think you can do it all yourself. And then but the corollary to that is be prepared for the unexpected, right? So doesn't matter how organized you are, there's always going to be something that'll get thrown at you. And, so you just have to kind of roll with it. It's like, okay, yeah. So we've got, we didn't take our patio furniture. So we got some patio furniture at IKEA and it's actually sitting in our living room now. So, okay, that's fine. If it's comfortable, who cares that it looks like it should be out in the garden? We don't.
I feel like you're on holiday and in the sun all the time. Perfect.
Yeah. So.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you, and thank you personally. If we may thank you as Expats Portugal for being part of that hive mind as well, because you've been very open and giving of yourself as you are tonight. In the forum and always ready to help other people. So we really appreciate that. And we pride ourselves on the strength of this community, and thank you for being a part of it, Amit.
Oh, thank you. And one of the things I personally wanted to do here is, hopefully help some smaller startup build their business, because obviously that's my background. And so, there are people maybe on this forum that, want to talk about that. I'd be happy to.
Oh, that's really kind.
I've offered.
Perfect. Okay. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction to yourself and your epic adventure coming over to Portugal. Sounds mostly favorable, and it's great to have you here. I'm going to stop the recording there so that we can go to some questions from the community. Who knows? They're